It's good day to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millsy, back to Hometown Commander, back for another episode of Millsy Brews, the show where I brew my version 1.0 deck list of the commander in front of us on my quest to brew the magic world. As always, the deck list is going to be down in the description for you below. So I would really appreciate it if you could interact with the video, like, comment, subscribe, use those links down in the description. Let me know what you think. I would really appreciate it. But today, we're rolling through Blurmbar. We're talking about another travel commander from the set. Today we're talking about Gev Scaled Scorch, our Rakdos Lizards commander. A 3/2 Lizard Mercenary. Hey, it's an outlaw. That could be a thing. Ward, pay 2 life Wizard. Other creatures you control enter with an additional +1/+1 counter on them for each opponent who's lost life that turn. Pay attention to that ability. That's the one we really care about. And then whenever you cast a Lizard spell, it deals 1 damage to target opponent. I think Gev's a lot of fun for 2 reasons. One, it actually pays off your opponent's losing life on our turn, which is something we want to happen by making our creatures come in stronger. And then, hey, it actually cares about lizards and will deal damage when we cast lizards, which is another way to turn on, right, +1/+1 counters for our creatures. Gev's cheap. It's going to come down early, which is cool. And we can pay off some abilities that just make our opponents lose a life each turn. That's going to automatically turn on Gev so that 3 counters are going on everything that came in. We can deal damage when creatures enter the battlefield. That's the thing that matters in our 2 colors, and we can do that really well. And that'll help spread out that damage and make sure we're always getting counters. We can turn up that damage so that if our opponents are taking 1 damage every time, at the start of every turn, or taking a damage off that little attack, we can use things that could double, triple, or even make that damage certain amounts to just make it even worse. And then, well, we just want to have a bunch of creatures come in and get those counters. At the end of the day, we're trying to add counters to creatures, and we want to make sure we have creatures to get counters added to. Notably, I'm not going to talk about a ton of lizards, because at the end of the day, the lizards just help with certain specific things. And the lizards as a tribe aren't very deep, so there's not a ton of all-stars that we're not going to talk about in the presentation. We might see more of them when we get later to the playtest. But damage and life loss. We want to find a way to make every opponent lose a life every turn so that we can have our things come in with counters. There's a couple of planeswalkers we can try. Chandra Torch of Defiance lets us exile the top card of our library. We can cast it, but if we don't, it deals 2 damage to each opponent. Ooh, there's a great way to hit everybody, meaning all of our creatures are going to come in with 3 counters on them. She can also add double red, deal some damage, or get an emblem whenever we cast a spell, so that's kind of an interesting payoff, but mainly we're trying to use that for the +1. Obnixilis is a very interesting planeswalker because it's the only planeswalker that has casualty, an ability that says when you cast it, you can sacrifice a creature with power X. When we do, we get to copy the spell, and the copy becomes a token, and the copy comes in with X loyalty. So we just sacrifice a creature to get a second copy of Obnixilis, and the 2 pair really together. One is going to come in and use its -2 to make a devil. This is when the creature dies, it deals 1 damage to any target. And then the other one on that first turn is going to use this +1. Each opponent loses 2 life unless they discard a card, and if we control a demon or a devil, we gain 2 life. What you're going to then do is make sure you always have a devil and just keep +ing 1 each of them. Our opponents are going to lose 2 life if they don't pitch a card, which is then their choice. If they don't pitch the card, congratulations, we've got 1 opponent for Gev. And if they do, well, now they're down a card. Either way, we're providing them an option. And hopefully we can keep both the Obnixilises around as we get more damage into our opponent. Bantu's Monument feels great here. Whenever we cast a creature, each opponent loses a life and we gain a life. This is just a great way to have this happen every turn. Remember, it's on cast, so we cast the creature, everybody loses 1, and then Gev's going to put the counters on it because it saw that everybody lost a life that turn. And then just 2 ways to make it happen no matter what. Ill-Gotten Inheritance. Beginning of your upkeep, it deals 1 damage to each opponent, and you gain a life. And then Sanctum of the Stonefangs. At the beginning of our pre-combat main phase, each opponent loses X life and we gain X, where X is the number of shrines we control. We only have 1. Sanctum of Stonefangs is the only shrine in the deck, but hey, that's 1 life everybody's going to lose. We gain a life, and now Gev is turned on and he's online. But as far as damage, when creatures come in, here's a lizard that matters. A Get Instigator. Comes in, has offspring, so it can have multiple lizards come in, not just the 1, but we can have a copy of it come in. And it says whenever their creature comes in, deal 1 damage to each opponent. So again, here's another way to get that damage train started if need be. Of course, we want to make sure this damage gets modified, like we're going to talk about in a second, but hey, worst case scenario, that's 1 damage that we can then turn on for the rest of our creatures to come in. Perforos does the same thing, it's just 2. And it's on a big body that's indestructible and could potentially become a big creature. And then Impact Tremors, same ability, just on an enchantment. Whenever a creature comes in, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. So The nice part is if we're relying on these abilities to get our opponents to take a life each turn, the first creature that comes in obviously won't get the counters unless they've already done by another ability, but then everyone after it will. So it's half being the first life loss for our opponents, and then the other half is just dealing damage out as we're putting creatures in. But as far as damage modifiers go, we have a lot of really fun ones. O'Hare Axonil from Lost Caverns of Ixalan says if a red source you control would deal non-combat damage less than its power to an opponent, it deals damage equal to its power instead. So that's pretty cool. That 1 could come up to 4. Think about having 2 of those Agate Instigators out and dealing 8 instead of 2. That's pretty darn good. Torbrand just says if a red source you control would deal damage to an opponent or a permanent opponent controls that much plus 2. So that's pretty darn cool. City on Fire will just triple the amount source it would deal to a permanent or player. That's pretty cool. And it has Convoke, which means we can use our creatures to help get it out, which is really great. The only note I'll make before we go too deep on the damage modifiers, and we'll go here to the next page while we do it, is anytime you have more than one modifier modifying the amount of damage you're dealing to your opponent, because your opponent is the one being dealt the damage, they get to choose. So by that I mean, if I have Torbrand out and O'Hare Axonil out, they could choose to have, let's say I'm dealing 1 damage, they could choose to have Torbrand add +2 to it to make it 3, and then O'Hare Axonil make it 4, instead of what we would do, which is want to make it 4, the O'Hare Axonil, and make it up to 6 with Torbrand. So just make sure you're aware when you're dealing with these damage modifyings that if there's more than one, your opponent gets the choice. Fire Emancipation, anytime a source we control would deal damage to a permanent or player, just triple that damage instead. And then because we have so many creatures coming in with counters on them, Uncivil Unrest feels like a great one here. Not only does it give all of our non-token creatures that come in Riot, giving them their choice of a counter or haste when they come in, but if a creature with a counter on it deals damage to a permanent or player, it deals double that damage instead. So a way to just make them even harder to deal with in combat. But, alright, we talked about the way we're going to try to get damage into our opponents. We talked about some of the ways to make it worse. Now we just need to talk about getting bodies on the board to get those counters. We have a lot of lizards in the deck, and the lizards are there too, but we also have these cheap red spells that just make goblins. Dragon Fodder, Krenko's Command, Horling Outburst, just dumping goblins onto the battlefield. Because Geb doesn't say non-token creatures get the counters. He just says any creature that comes in get the counters. Meaning that this 2-mana Krenko's Command is going to give me 2 4/4s as long as everybody's lost a life this turn. And that's important. Especially when we have things like haste enablers in the deck and damage modifiers. You start to see how this can be really good, and we're playing as many of these as we can. Song of Totentans and Temp with Vengeance are X mana spells that make us just X tokens. Temp's pretty cool because our opponents can take the 1/1s, and if they do, we get more of the 1/1s, just meaning more 4/4s effectively. I like Song of Totentans because it gives all of our creatures haste after we make all the rats, which is pretty cool because then the rats can attack that turn. And then a card that I've loved in previous decks that I think works really well here is Elemental Mastery. It says you enchant a creature, and you can tap that creature to make X 1/1 elementals with haste, where X is that creature's power, and you exile them at the beginning of the next end step. What I like the most about Elemental Mastery is that every turn you're just tapping to get that many creatures. They're going to hopefully come in with the counters, and you're just going to attack with them. They're gone at the end step, but hey, you're just forcing your opponent to deal with this damage they know are coming unless they deal with the creature it's attached to. And we don't necessarily need to put this on Gev. If we have a 6/6 or a 7/7 come in with those counters, we just put it on that and get 7 of those 1/1 that would be 4/4 elementals every turn. And you can start to see how you can kind of amass that value with Elemental Mastery. But I've said it before on the show, and I'll say it again. No deck's ever complete. This is my version 1.0 shot at Gev, and I think there's some things we need to figure out in testing, which is how are our ratios in the deck working between damage sources and damage modifiers and lizards and other creatures. And so I think there's some cards we can talk about that didn't make the cut that I would look very closely at. Well, the one card that I think you're going to see a lot when you look at Gev's EDH rec page, because it's a combo, is Murderous Redcap. This is a creature that says when it ETBs, it deals damage equal to its power to any target and has Persist. So when it dies, if it had no -1/-1 counters on it, you return it to the battlefield with a -1/-1 counter on it. Well, remember that Gev puts a counter on the creature when it comes in, equal to that number of opponents. If you have a -1/-1 counter and a +1/+1 counter on a creature at the same time, they cancel out and they both get removed. Meaning if we have any relevant way to sacrifice Murderous Redcap, it's just going to keep coming back again and again as long as the value's there. I think this makes a ton of sense in the deck. I'm not playing a ton of sacrifice outlets for it though, which is the only reason that I didn't put it in the list. But I think if you want to put more sacrifice outlets in the deck and you want to care about red cap, find a way to find it, whatever you want to do, that option's there. I think now that I think about it more, it probably should just come in as a, hey, if it happens, it happens. Because think about it, even if it dies, it just comes back and you get to dome somebody for that power. But I guess now I've convinced myself back into it. So there it is. I will probably just edit this. I'll probably just edit the deck list and put it in and take something out now that I talked myself into it. Cryptolith Fragment, 3 mana rock that comes in tapped. When you tap it for a mana, each player loses a life. So this will immediately trigger everything for Gev. And it flips over to a creature on the backside that everybody loses 3 when it attacks. So just another way to do that. But again, we have mana rocks. We have other ways. I wasn't quite sure how many of those effects we really needed, especially with all this ETB damage. So again, that's something I would kind of look at as we tested. And same thing with Mechanized Warfare. If a red or artifact source you control would deal damage to an opponent or a permanent opponent controls, that much +1 instead. I just wasn't sure how many of those effects we needed. We do have a good amount of them in the deck already. And again, in testing, if I don't see it enough, you bring the Mechanized Warfare in, and that way you have more of them. But let's get into our playtest. Let's see what we can find. Starting with a 3-lander with a Saw in half, a fun way to destroy a creature and get 2 tokens that are a copy of it. Cindering Cutthroat says it enters with a +1/+1 counter. If an opponent lost a life this turn, we can give it Menace. Lizard Blades, it is a lizard, but it's also an equipment that can give a creature double strike. And then Animation Module, which is a fun combo with Gev, because it says whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are put on a permanent you control, we can pay 1. If we do, we make a servo. So basically, for as much mana as we have, as long as we get 1 creature to come in, we can keep paying 1 and getting another servo. It comes in with the counters, get another servo. So Animation Module is great. It's going to allow us to go wide for the amount of mana we have, right, and really take advantage of it. So turn 1, we draw Stonefangs, which is great because we can get this party started pretty quickly that way. Of course, Gev doesn't have to be there, right, when they lose the life. He just won't get the counters when he comes in, which means we could go turn 2 Stonefangs into turn 3 Gev and get the party started that way. But turn 1 Temple of Malice, we got nothing better to do on turn 1. We see Rakdos Carnarium. I'll leave it on top. It's always good to get another land to get the party started. Turn 2 will play the Mountain, and I think I'll play the Stonefangs. I'd rather get this started and then get Gev down than do the opposite, just in case somebody removes Gev. So turn 3... the Stonefangs has gone off, meaning that everybody's lost a life. I think I'll just Gev here and play the modules. So now I'm setting myself up perfectly for next turn when everyone's going to lose the life, and then as soon as something comes in, it's going to get the counters. What I'd ideally like to do next turn is maybe Lizard's Blade into paying a couple mana into the module, but we'll see what happens. Turn 3, someone might have removal for Gev here. The big thing to keep in mind when you play test is, as much as we care about our opponents having removal and things like that, we got to kind of think, what would we do if they didn't, so we can flesh out our game plan. So here on turn 3, I kind of want to get this Carnarium down. So I would tap Haunted Ridge for a mana, just so that way I have it. Still play the Carnarium, right, which bounces it back to my hand. So now I've got 3 mana. I would use 2 of it for the Lizard Blades. Remember that Lizard Blades comes in with 3 counters on it, because Stonefangs already came off. Module is going to trigger. I'm going to put a counter on it, right, to make a servo, and that servo comes in with 3 counters on it. So now on future turns, we can put more mana into that module to really take advantage of it. Gev would have also dealt someone a damage when I cast Lizard Blades, but that is what it is. Now we're setting up great next turn for potentially getting some more creatures in. And this Animation Module Gev combo is something I think is really helpful because you're making 4/4 servos, and that feels really good. You can pay 3 and get another counter on a permanent, but that's okay. We will, let's see, the Castle Lochthwain would come in tapped. We could play something like the Posse Boss. I think I'm okay with this. If I put the Haunted Ridge in, I can get the Posse Boss, get 2 Mercenaries, and get a servo. If I put Lochthwain in, it would make more sense to do something else. I actually think that it might make more sense to get Perforos down this turn, right? Now that we have it. Perforos is not a creature because our devotion to red is just 3. and it's not a creature coming in. That is 4 mana though. I don't have a mana to play anything else, so I guess I'll put the Lockthwain in tapped. Again, potentially get in for some damage here. Lizard Blades is a 4/4 with double strike, so it could be a big way to, to hit an opponent for some good damage. And I think this just sets up another turn here on turn 6 for us to get some good damage with Perforos. So we've already got Sanctum online. It's already damaged everybody. I kind of like the Posse Boss. So what's going to happen here is it says other outlaws have haste. So anything that's a mercenary, pirate, rogue, warlock, or assassin have haste. Posse Boss is going to enter. 2 damage from Perforos goes off to each opponent. When it enters, we make 2 1/1 mercenaries, right? Now we have 5 devotion, so Perforos is a creature, so it can attack this turn. But remember that Posse Boss and those mercenaries are all going to come in with 3 damage. Not just from the Stone Fangs, but now from Perforos, because Perforos dealt 3 damage to everybody. So that was just 4 mana. We have 2 mana left. I can make 2 more servos here. And get 3 more counters on them. And now we're in business, right? These guys all have a haste because of Hellspur. Hellspur doesn't, but they do. Which means that now Perforos can attack, and Perforos is going to hit hard. We take a big attack here. We've got some servos up left to block. And now we have the Mountain Dew come down. We have Temp with Vengeance, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We could put 6 into the Vengeance. It's going to deal 12 to each opponent with the 6 creatures coming in. And if any of them take the elementals, well, they're going to just give us more elementals for more damage. Those again come in as 4/4s, have haste, and can attack immediately. And we're probably just knocking at least one opponent over that turn. But, okay, pretty consistent draw on that one. Let's see what we got this time. We've got a Rakdos Canarium in a mountain, which is a weird 2-lander here. Chaos Warp, Valley Flamecaller, Hearthborn Battler, a Hordeling Outburst, and Iridescent Vinelasher, which deals damage to an opponent when a land comes in. So a lot more lizard-heavy right hand this time. But still interesting nonetheless. We draw for a Magebane Lizard. We'll put that mountain down. We really need to hope for an untapped land here. Whew, okay. I was a little worried that we were going to have to put that Carnarium down and end up down on mana, but that's okay. We can't cast Tap for the Black yet because we don't have a swamp, so I can't cast Gev here. Magebane says whenever a player casts a non-creature spell, it deals damage to the number of non-creature spells they cast this turn to it. Interesting ability. I don't mind that. Get a creature down. Get something down. I really wish that I had a swamp so that I could tap for black, but that's okay. We'll go to turn 3. We see Animation Module. So I think I have to pick that up to play the Carnarium to get it down. I've still got 2 mana, 1 red and 1 colorless. I think I just play the Animation Module and kind of move it on. Next turn we should be able to get Gev and maybe something else down, or maybe just Offspring out the Vinelasher. A little bit more of an awkward draw this time, but we're up to 4 mana. Do we have any way to hit anybody every turn? Hearthborn deals damage when people cast their second spell. Flamecaller makes lizards deal more damage. We don't have any of those, key, damage every turn type abilities, but I kind of like the idea of Offspringing the Vinelasher. This should allow us to damage 2 opponents anytime we play a land, so this would be, useful on future turns. And I've got 1 mana left, and I don't think I can do anything with it, so we'll move on to the next turn here. Alright, still no land, but that's okay. I think we'll get Gev down. I've got a red and a white a red and a colorless left. Not much to do with it. I feel like we just need one thing here, right? And these are the ones that we want to see when we're playtesting. These games where we just need one thing, one land, one thing, and see where our consistency issues are. Is it more draw? Is it more, these are the things we want to see. But go to turn 6, we play the mountain. 2 opponents lose a life, right? So now things are coming in with 2 counters. And I kind of like the idea of just Hordeling Outburst and making 3 goblins. Those goblins are all going to come in with 2 counters on them, and I think I'll just pay the remaining 2 mana into making, making the 2 servos, put 2 counters on them, kind of take the best we can out of our 5 mana, you know what I mean? And attack if we want to with the Vine Lashers and the Mage Bane, but I doubt on turn 6 we have any, healthy attacks. 2 more damage because of the Vine Lashers there. 6 mana, I kind of like the Fire Emancipation. Now everything's dealing triple damage. Attack with the Goblins, they're 3/3s that are dealing 9. Hurt our opponents a little bit. Nothing came in that turn, but that's okay. And then turn 8, we would have loved a damage source there. Nothing to reanimate. I love the half idea of just chaos warping myself to see what happens. But 6 mana. Let's see, I can play the Rattler to deal 1 damage, the Battler to deal 1 damage to somebody, right? That's 3 because of Fire Emancipation. So that's 1 counter, right? So this is going to come in with 1 counter, right? Because it's on cast. And then I could play the Flame Caller. Realizing I probably should have played the Flame Caller first. Actually, I apologize. That's, 3 damage. Another 3 damage with Gev. So this is going to come in with 2 counters. And then again, not enough mana left over to do the module. But hey, this has haste. This is a 3/4 hitting for 9. All these guys are hitting hard. We take a big attack here. We'll go 1 more turn. Oh, here Axionil feels good. It's just kind of bad. Kind of bad because they can double before it hits 4 for Axionil. But we think about this. I just want to see what happens if I Chaos Warp my own Mage Bane Lizard. What do we think would happen? Just out of curiosity. Oh, Krenko. Okay. So we get Krenko in. Again, I would just attack with the Lizards. Kind of an odd way to end it there, but again, we were just really missing one repeatable way to deal damage. We found a couple of them, just couldn't get the consistency there. But let me know, what do you think of Gev? Am I on the right track? Am I not? Are you building Gev? What route did you take it? I think there's a lot of fun in here, a lot of fun interactions. And I enjoyed building the deck. I enjoyed playing the deck. I'd love to hear what you think of it. Catch you guys next time.